Mike Tomlin spoke to the media today at the annual NFL owners meeting. We're going to break down some tweets from some of the insiders that were there who got to interview him, talk about what I think he meant and what it means for the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell if you haven't already done so. Without further ado, let's get into business. All righty. So, like I said, at the top of the show here, we're going to be talking about some of the insiders and some of the things that they were saying and what's coming out, or tweets that were coming out from this um, coach's interview with Mike Tomlin at the NFL owners um, annual meeting. So let's start off here where it says Gary Dulac, who is a writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, states Mike Tomlin on the deadline on Rodgers. I don't know that we've approached it from a deadline perspective. Deadlines don't often bring that to a heed. So right there, first and foremost, I think that kind of means that they're handling Aaron Rodgers with some kid gloves. I think they feel that if they tell him, hey, ultimatum time, us or the highway, we need to know today or we need to know by a specific day, they may not like the answer to that question. I think that's what this means right here. That's the way I take it. Obviously, that's not the case with most players. I think most players, you give them a deadline. You tell them, hey, and this is not a secret for Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, there's been a lot of players that have come out and spoken about how Mike Tomlin handles business. They'll give you an offer and let you know they're going to also go out there and shop per se. And if they find something, they find something. Obviously, with quarterbacks being limited at this point, there may not be much to find. So I guess maybe they are just still waiting on Aaron Rodgers. However, this tells me they're not giving him a deadline. They're not telling him, hey, make up your mind by X date, which means I think, well, a couple things. One, I think that means they have to be comfortable with a Mason Rudolph in the building. He's the only person that is there that is signed with an actual contract, and one that is going past this year as well. I mean, that's, I guess, for the first time in a couple of years, there's a quarterback that's on a contract more than 1 year. So I think they have confidence in Mason Rudolph and what he can do. I think what he did at the end of 2023, going into that, playoff game against the Buffalo Bills, I thought he played fairly well. I am a very strong um, mindset. I have of the mindset of that film matters, and it takes more than 3 games to figure somebody out. And so I'd like to see more of a larger sample size of Mason Rudolph as the guy with the pieces around him on a game plan that is designed for him with this team. And with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I know that he went out there to Tennessee and he did some things backing up Will Levis, but again, that wasn't his design for him in mind. Which, although right now the playbook that's being put together, I doubt it's with him in mind. However, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking at Aaron Rodgers in mind for that position, and I don't think that, um, as far as the tangibles go, as far as what you expect to see out of the players, I don't think that the playbook would change much for an Aaron Rodgers and a Mason Rudolph. You're not going to have a lot of quarterback runs there. So, but just to kind of go back to what Jerry said here, or Gary said here, I apologize, or Jerry, Jerry Dulac. Back to what he said. I just feel like they're handling him with kid gloves. He goes on to say, asked if he'd like to have it settled before the draft, and Tomlin said, I hadn't thought about it, to be honest with you. I think he's lying there. I mean, how do you not think about having this settled before the draft, unless it's already settled and it's just not out there, right? I think that's also been kind of put out there, that maybe perhaps the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers have a handshake deal in place. They're just waiting on something, maybe the Pat McAfee thing on April 9th or whatever it is. He denies it, but maybe there is some sort of specific event in mind where Aaron Rodgers intends on announcing to the world that he's going to be the next quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jerry Dulac goes on to say that the Steelers typically don't discuss potential free agents. So Tomlin would say all Tomlin would say about Rodgers in the meeting is, in quote, he and I obviously have known each other for some time, and it was really good to spend some time together and get to know each other more intimately, end quote. Again, just kind of probably avoiding questions about signing. What was the time that you guys spent? Was there any contract negotiations? How close to a contract did you guys get? In order and efforts to avoid those, you talk about what it what it was outside of that. It was to get to know each other. So that way, when those questions do come abroad, that's not what that meeting was about. Mike Tomlin was a bit evasive about signing Aaron Rodgers, but said today it's been reported that he spent the day with us and it was a really, really good day. Well, here's actually an image of Aaron Rodgers leaving the facility that day. As you can see, he's incognito. He has that baseball hat, he's got some sunglasses, a hoodie. He's in a white rental vehicle with no tint, so it's not like he's pulling up in a G-Wagon or a Range Rover where that's kind of telling everybody, hey, somebody important in the spring is here at the building. You get what I'm saying? Get what I'm saying? So he's going in real incognito, and I think this was a way of him testing also how quiet are things going to be in the building. I don't think Aaron likes his business aired out there and stuff like that. And so, I think that may have been what was a part of this test drive that he did. And like I said, I called it a test drive because it wasn't just him. It was also the Steelers organization and the coaching staff interviewing him, talking with him football and et cetera, and his commitment level. And from all accounts, it was a great meeting. I think there's a handshake deal there. That's just me. Let me know in the comment section. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about his get up? Definitely in a rental vehicle, white vehicle, no tint, incognito, doesn't want to drive attention to himself. Interesting stuff. I guess he didn't want people asking him the question, are you signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers? And putting him in a situation where he doesn't want to say no comment. You know what I mean? But let's move on to what Mark Caboli had to say. Mark Caboli, also an insider and who's also a Steelers correspondent for the Pat McAfee show. He's also been a guy that has spent out there saying that he strongly suspects that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to end up signing Aaron Rodgers. Let's continue to read here. It says, Mike Tomlin said he's not going to do any kind of darkness retreat. He was joking. We got too much other business going on. Well, I hope that the starting quarterback of your franchise is into the business that you have going on and not going on this darkness retreat on his own. I think that's the biggest question mark, right? Is the level of commitment. Is Aaron Rodgers going to come in? Is he going to show up to training camp? Or is he going to go to Egypt or some random place and be locked up and not build that chemistry? Tomlin doesn't seem to believe that there's not going to be an impact on training camp or this team without having Aaron Rodgers in the building. One that might say that they're fairly confident in Mason Rudolph, that if Aaron don't sign, that they're okay with Mason. Maybe perhaps you don't know what you have until it's gone is kind of true, so to speak. And they missed Mason enough to actually offer him a 2-year contract. So he's not the only quarterback that's on the or at least we won't see a complete overhaul of the quarterback position next year. Mason Rudolph is on there, even if it's just going to end up being him and Aaron, if the Steelers decide or end up not drafting a quarterback, which I don't think is going to be the case. I think they're going to end up going and drafting a guy. But I digress. So Mike Tomlin joking about not going on a darkness retreat. Just to kind of put that joke out there is another indication to me that there's some sort of familiarity there with the player and that there's probably some movement there. Like I said, I strongly suspect it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, QB1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mark Caboli goes on to say that Tomlin on similarities between DK Metcalf and George Pickens. DK is a big man. GP is tall. There's a difference. And I agree with him, and I think this is also a message to George Pickens that they're not going to stroke his little ego anymore and continue to handle him with the kid gloves. Those are off at this point. They no longer need him to be before he was the wide receiver room. I mean, Calvin Austin is a great asset, and Roman Wilson, we don't know what he has. Van Jefferson was an experiment that probably should have been cut, and Roman Wilson should have been given an opportunity to see what he had much earlier. Mike Williams was a guy that the Steelers didn't really even put out there on the field very often. So it was George Pickens. Well, now they got DK Metcalf. He's the big man. He's wide receiver one. He's your payday. So now, George, you don't, before it was like, all right, who are you going to turn to? Kind of similar to the quarterback position. Who are you going to turn to? What are you going to do? Well, now you have somebody, and you're not wide receiver one anymore. You're wide receiver two. And now you have to earn that position, earn that paycheck, which I'm sure the Pittsburgh Steelers would love to pay him. You can look at having Aaron Rodgers for a year or two or whatever the case may be, but his paycheck is not going to be anywhere near Joe Burrow's. And so, you're not going to pay George Pickens, T. Higgins money. I mean, that's just what it is. Maybe somewhere around there you might be comfortable with, to be honest with you, now that I think about it. But you're not going to pay him over that. And you're not paying Aaron Rodgers much. He's going to be there for 1 year. I highly anticipate that you're going to end up drafting a quarterback either this year, next year, or both. Either way, they're going to be on rookie contracts that aren't going to cost you much. You can end up paying a George Pickens, a T. Higgins contract after this season if he can end up putting it onto the field. I mean, most likely what I think the Pittsburgh Steelers would do is franchise tag him. I think that'd probably be the smartest and safest bet. Franchise tag him, see if he does well. If he does well, see if he can do it 2 years in a row. He does it 2 years in a row, then you can get him that contract. He does good for 1 year. It might be one of those situations where you have a player that excels 1 year just to get a contract, and then they're back to, just maybe not to the standard that they were during that contract year. But I agree, and I like the sentiment here. I like the tone that it brings. Like, hey, George, you're not big man anymore. You're just tall. All right. Mark Caboli goes on to say, I don't know if we necessarily feel that way. Tomlin said about adding another veteran quarterback to the room, even if Rodgers signs. I think like I mentioned before, I think they're fairly comfortable and confident in Mason Rudolph and what he was able to do last time. I think that he was able to control the egos and of the wide receiver room, whether it was Deontay Johnson or George Pickens at the end of that year in 2023. I think he's a potential leader, and I don't think he's Aaron Rodgers. I think that if you were to try to go into a playoff game and you say, hey, for that one game, Aaron Rodgers or Mason Rudolph, you'd be foolish to not say Aaron Rodgers at this point. But Mason, if he goes out there and he can show that those 3 games weren't just because he was new, weren't just because teams didn't have film on him within that offense. If he can go out there and show up, which I think he can. I mean, the guy's he's accurate. He's not dangerous with the football. He's not going to hit you with, splitting receivers or cornerbacks, threading the needle type of throws or anything like that. But he's going to keep you in games. And with the defense that the Pittsburgh Steelers have, as long as the offense can play complementary football, I think that this team has an opportunity. And at the end of the day, I really don't think that whether it's Rodgers or Rudolph or anybody else that's out there, that them alone is going to get you a ring. I think you're going to have some very strong components around them, and those components to have very strong years. TJ Watt's going to have a defensive player of the year type of year. Zach Frazier is going to have make that second step. Fautanu is going to have an all-pro type, Pro Bowl type year. So is Broderick Jones. He's going to have to make that step up. You're going to have these players play at their all-time best throughout the year for this team to be, in my opinion, pushing for that possibility. But, I think that me personally, I think they're aiming for that next year's draft, guys. I think that draft is a draft where you're going to have a better quarterback class. The comp pick situation that the Steelers have set themselves up with, where they're going to have quite a few. And now you can trade those. For those that keep asking, can you trade them or can you not? You can now. You can trade them. You just can't trade them until you have them, obviously. So the Steelers can't go and make a trade right now and say, hey, we're going to give you, for instance, Minkah Fitzpatrick and next year's fourth round comp pick for this upcoming or next year's first round pick. You can't do that at this point. And so you have to have had that already. So the Steelers would have to wait until after the season, and those things been given out before they can do that. But it's very obvious that they're setting themselves up with quite a bit of comp picks in next year's draft, and I think that's to set themselves up for a quarterback. Because when you look at this team, I think they're going to go for a defensive lineman. I think in the draft that is. I think they're going to go running back. Maybe wide receiver, maybe not. I really don't think so now that I think about it more. You have George Pickens this year. You can franchise tag him if he goes good. If he does well, you have Roman Wilson, who you hadn't really used. Calvin Austin's pretty, I think he's very, very strong number 3. George Pickens and DK, I mean, with your 1 and 2 or 1A and 1B is that's going to cause some nightmare problems for defenses. And I think that offensively, if they get the right running back into the realm there, and the offensive line can take that next step, this team could be one player away and be that quarterback player from being, a Super Bowl contender for years to come. I think they're getting fairly close. But let's continue this. Tomlin, when asked what he likes about Rodgers, he's not on our team, and I'm not going to do a whole bunch of talking about that. Mike Tomlin sure does have a way of dodging things, doesn't he? Free agency is a process, and I have nothing more than that to add, Tomlin said about Rodgers. Mike Tomlin is not concerned that the quarterback room has turned over completely for a second straight year. Said basically, talk to me next year if that happens again. Be worried. Well, I mean, you have Mason Rudolph there next season, so it's not going to happen again, obviously. And if you draft the guy, then they're going to be on some sort of rookie contract for more than this year. So I don't think that the entire room will be completely turned over next year, but I think that another year with a different starting quarterback entering week 1 is a high possibility. Mike Tomlin gave zero indication that the Steelers want or don't want / expect or don't expect Aaron Rodgers to be their starting quarterback next year. Oh my gosh. Yep. So let's see. Now let's talk about what Alan Saunders had to say. Alan stated that more from Tomlin feels like the start of training camp would be the first time not having a quarterback sign would impact the team. Not concerned about drafting planning with WRT Rodgers. I'm assuming that's some sort of going with Rodgers. Open to the possibility of Mason Rudolph being the guy at quarterback. Thinks George Pickens and DK Metcalf have complementary skill set. Confident at Jalen Warren at running back. Still open to adding to his coaching staff. And adding to the coaching staff, I think, is a huge one, but not necessarily one that I think it's actually fairly important, to be honest with you. I think one of the things that has gone on here when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers is that they've had to wait to do adjustments, fine-tune adjustments and things like that until they have a bye or a mini bye. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're kind of spread out thin. Maybe perhaps if they had coaches who can fine-tooth those details with these players throughout the week, added to the coaching staff would actually be very beneficial to this team, to be 110% honest with you. Let's see. Saunders also said he asked Tomlin why the Steelers' potential options at cornerback, Darius Slay, was the best choice. Seems like a veteran presence was the thing that they were looking for. Tomlin goes, we've done similar business in recent years. Joe Hayden, Pat Pete. So we're excited about getting a guy with some real know-how and experience to help us in our collective efforts. One of the big reasons the Steelers are comfortable in waiting Aaron Rodgers is the level of faith in Mason Rudolph. We're excited about having Mason back. I think that's why we reacquired him. They did reacquire him without the first string quarterback. That's an interesting thing that you have to put up there right now. Obviously, they put on there that he was supposed to be the backup quarterback in mind. But no time frame from the no time frame from the Pittsburgh Steelers to Aaron Rodgers, but Jalen Warren at running back. I'm confident at Jalen Warren at running back. I'm not sure he can handle 17 games like that, though. I mean, he had some injuries that he was dealing with all last season. I feel that his game is probably best suited as a 1-2 punch. Put somebody else out there. I really love the Steelers to get a home run hitter. I know Gentee is the guy that everybody's looking at from Boise State, Idaho, out of Boise. However, I think he's going to go way before the Steelers can. If they can get a home run hitter, guy that's quick, guy that can get to the end zone, I think that with them being that person being a complementary running back to Jalen Warren would be the best fit for this offense, especially if the Steelers end up going with a Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I think that you got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Pat Fryermuth, Darnell Washington. You're throwing the ball. You're getting the ball into your guys' hands. You got basketball players there that you can just throw the ball up, especially in the red zone. And so maybe perhaps, getting a speedy guy would really, really help this offense because, the safeties are going to have to back up for the DK and George Pickens show. They're going to have to back up. They're going to, the running backs are going to see some softer defenses in the box. And I would really like to see somebody that can take advantage of that. Well, let me know what you guys think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. I'll be back as soon as we get some more updates. Until next time.